Welcome everyone, I'm really excited for today. We're gonna make homemade flour tortillas, and this recipe comes exclusively from El Rosal's flour. They sell these in supermarkets, and you can find the recipe right on the outside of the bag. How easy is that? Let's jump into our ingredients. So to get started, one of the first things you're going to need is a nice large size bowl and a whisk. Flour into the bowl, and we're going to follow that up by dumping in our salt. Now I have two measuring spoons here. One was 1/4 teaspoon and one was half a teaspoon, which equals 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Now I'm going to be stirring this with a whisk just to get everything evenly distributed throughout my dry ingredients. Now I'm going to add in the shortening. Now you can use lard, as I mentioned before, instead of shortening, whichever you prefer. I'm using shortening because I would like my tortillas to be vegetarian. So my friends that don't eat meat products, they wouldn't want to eat the ones made with lard, which comes from pigs, pork. So I'm going to incorporate the shortening here with my fingers. Don't be afraid to get a little bit messy. And you're kind of want to incorporate that, and then you're going to add in your hot water. Now this is pretty hot water. And what it's going to do is it's going to help incorporate the shortening, which you know is vegetable oil, and it's going to help melt that a little bit into the dough. So we're just going to continue to work that dough around, adding water little bit by little, and you're just going to keep working at it, get that water hydrating the flour, a little bit more water in there a little bit at a time. Looks like I just poured the rest in there. So I'm going to work at this dough for quite some time, get all the dried little crumbs of flour that are sticking to the side of the bowl, get that incorporated into our dough. Now, as you can see, my dough is way too wet, but don't worry, you haven't failed. Instead, what you can do is grab some extra flour, and I'm going to incorporate in 2 tablespoonfuls of all-purpose flour onto our dough, which is going to help with our dough because it's a little bit too wet. So at this point, we are just continuing to work our dough, slightly kneading it in the bowl, you know, to the point where it's not so wet, and this looks pretty good here. So I'm going to get my bowl out of the way, and I'm going to knead this on my countertop. So to prevent your dough from sticking to your countertop, I'm going to flour my countertop, put some put some flour on there so that the dough does not stick, and I'm going to knead it for quite some time. I kneaded my dough for about 3.5 minutes, and what this is doing is developing the gluten so that our tortillas have just the right amount of chewiness. So after about 3.5 minutes, you can see that I've mopped up all the excess flour on the countertop, and it's incorporated into our dough, and it's just really coming together nicely. And as I knead, I'm starting to knead it into a log of sorts, kind of a long dough, and this will help when we get the dough into the shapes of making the tortillas. I'm getting a separate cutting board to put our dough balls on, and I'm making dough balls that way you know that's about the right amount of dough that you need to make a tortilla, and I'm flouring this cutting board just so you know things don't stick to it. And I'm pinching them off about the size of a golf ball is what you want to do. I'm just rolling them out to make a perfect spherical shape, and I'm adding it to my cutting board. So you would just continue to do this until all your dough has been made into balls. prepare a flat frying pan on your stove over medium heat. While the frying pan is heating up, let's go ahead and roll out your dough balls. So I'm going to lightly flour my surface of my countertops so that it doesn't stick. And I'm using a roller here. And before I even start rolling it out, I kind of press my dough ball down almost into kind of a circle. That makes it easier to start with. And I'm going to put some flour on my rolling pin just so it doesn't stick to my dough. And I'm going to begin rolling it out. So as I'm rolling it out, I'm just kind of moving all over. You know, if you look on YouTube, there's different ways that people like to roll out dough. Some people like to flip it as they do it. This style worked for me where I was moving instead of moving my dough. Now, one thing that you really got to keep in mind when you're doing this step is it was very important that you flour the surface of your countertop or else it will stick when you get to the end. So I'm just kind of moving all around in a circular motion, making it very, very flat. Our end goal is that you should be able to start seeing your countertop through the tortilla. So it should be thin enough that you can see your countertop through it. And I don't know if you can see that. You can slowly start to see that you can see Mr. Etzel's countertop there as I'm rolling it out. So I'm just going to continue doing this. When I think it's thin enough, I'm going to kind of lift it off, and we are ready to put this in our hot frying pan. So we've got our hot frying pan here. It's ready to rock and roll. I'm going to stick my tortilla in there. So our tortilla is hanging out. It's chilling in the frying pan there, and I've kind of sped this video up just a little bit. So you can see as it's starting to heat, there's little air bubbles that are starting to pop up, and that means that it's getting hot just like we like it, and it's probably going to start blistering and get those little brown spots that we know and love on the other side. So let's go ahead and take a look, take a peek. Oh, that's perfect. So we're going to go ahead and flip it, and we're going to let that happen on the other side too. And you can see my pan is nice and hot because those air bubbles are starting immediately, and that's what you want, a really nice and hot pan. And once they're finished, I'm going to move them onto a towel, and the towel is going to help keep them warm. So you can stack them on top of each other and keep them in a towel. And when you're done, you have some nice, hot, fresh, homemade flour tortillas that you can use for a variety of dishes. Please enjoy.